Look at this hermit crab. It has no shell. Its abdomen, soft, pale, unprotected, is coiled behind it like a question it cannot answer. Every organ it has is exposed. Every predator within range knows it. And yet it is alive, out in the open, doing something that makes no biological sense on the surface. It is in the middle of becoming something else. Its body is flattening. Its tail is folding inward. Its shell is becoming its own skin. In 10 million years, something descended from this animal will be unrecognizable, broader, lower, armored from birth, with no memory of the borrowed shell it used to live in. Evolution is turning it into a crab, and it has done this at least 5 times already, to completely unrelated animals, whether they agreed or not. Everything you were taught about evolution, random mutation, gradual drift, infinite possible outcomes, implies that the history of life should be full of surprises. And it is, except for one thing: the crab. Evolution keeps making the crab. Not the same crab, not through shared ancestry, independently, in separate lineages, across 180 million years of ocean history. Start with a lobster body, a shrimp body, a squat lobster body, a hermit crab body. Give it enough time under the right conditions and evolution will flatten it, fold its tail under, harden its shell, and hand you something that looks, functions, and moves like a crab. Scale that to something the brain can hold. Imagine 5 separate architects working in different countries, in different centuries, with no contact with each other, all given the same brief: design something that can survive on the ocean floor. And all 5 independently hand in the exact same blueprint. That is not coincidence. That is the ocean giving evolution a specification it cannot argue with. The term for this is carcinization. It was named in 1916 by a British zoologist who described it as one of the many attempts of nature to evolve a crab. 1 century later, the attempts have not stopped. And the question of why is one of the strangest open problems in evolutionary biology. And it gets weirder. Here is how the heist works. A crustacean starts life as something distinctly non-crab: a lobster, a shrimp, a squat lobster hanging in the water column, tail extended, cylindrical, built for speed and escape. This is the getaway driver. Fast, reactive, built around the charadoid escape reaction, a full-body backward rocket launch triggered by any threat. The tail is the engine. The tail is the survival mechanism. The tail is everything. Then the ocean changes the brief. Predators get faster. The water floor fills with crevices worth hiding in. The animals that can flatten, tuck, and disappear into rock live longer than the ones still trying to outswim everything. The tail, that critical, indispensable engine, becomes a liability. Too much exposed flesh, too much drag, too easy to grab. So evolution makes a trade. It folds the tail inward, tucking it under the body. It widens the shell, lowering the profile. It shortens the body plan, concentrates the armor, relocates the legs for lateral movement instead of forward escape. The getaway driver retires. The tank moves in. And critically, once the tail folds, a cascade begins. The muscles that powered the tail atrophy. The nerves reroute. The blood vessels shift. The gill chambers expand to fill the new space. The organs reorganize around the new geometry. One change pulls 20 others behind it like a thread unraveling a seam. Researchers scanning crab bodies with micro-CT imaging have found that the internal architecture of every independently carcinized species follows the same reorganization sequence. Different starting points, identical chain of internal consequences. Evolution is not finding different paths to the crab. It is finding the same path from different starting points, because the path is the only one that works. And here is where it becomes genuinely strange. Evolution has also unmade crabs, at least 7 documented times. A fully carcinized lineage reverses. The tail reemerges. The shell narrows. The crab uncrabs. Biologists call this decarcinization, and it should be rare. Reversing a complex cascade of internal reorganization is supposed to be almost impossible, but it keeps happening. The crab form is not a destination. It is a position on a dial that evolution turns in both directions, depending on what the ocean is currently asking for. The math says evolution should not be this predictable. The entire framework of natural selection is built on the premise that mutation is random, that the space of possible outcomes is vast, and what survives is shaped by environment after the fact, not steered toward a predetermined shape before. An evolving lineage is not supposed to have a destination. It is supposed to wander. And yet, 5 independent lineages, 180 million years, the same body plan, rebuilt from scratch each time, down to the internal organ layout, not just the external shape, but the precise sequence of internal reorganization that follows the shell widening, documented across species that have never shared an ancestor, close enough to explain it. Here is the detail that makes evolutionary biologists put the paper down and stare at the wall. A lobster and a true crab share a common ancestor, but that ancestor was not a crab. So the crab body plan evolved after they diverged, independently, in both lineages. Meaning the crab is not something evolution stumbled into once. It is something evolution stumbled into separately, multiple times, using animals that were already related enough to have the right genetic raw material, but not related enough for the result to be inherited. The ocean kept handing the same exam to different students, and they all wrote the same answer. On the bright side, at least evolution has a type. That is more self-awareness than most people manage. But the body plan is not the part that keeps evolutionary biologists awake. The genome is. Standard evolutionary models predict that convergent evolution produces similar shapes through different genetic mechanisms. 2 lineages find the same answer by different routes, the way 2 musicians in different countries might independently write songs in the same key, but using entirely different chord progressions to get there. Carcinization breaks this. When researchers map the developmental genetics of independently carcinized species, they keep finding the same genetic switches being thrown in the same sequence. Not similar pathways, not analogous pathways, the same pathway, the same genes, activating in the same order, producing the same cascade of internal reorganization in animals that have not shared a meaningful common ancestor in hundreds of millions of years. Here is the what if that rewrites the framework. What if the crab body plan is not something evolution invents repeatedly, but something it unlocks? What if the genetic instructions for carcinization are not being rewritten from scratch each time, but were embedded in the ancestral decapod genome hundreds of millions of years ago, dormant, waiting to be activated by the right combination of environmental pressure? Under this model, evolution is not an open-ended search. It is a key and lock system. The ocean floor applies pressure. The genome has a pre-existing response. The crab emerges not because evolution found the crab, but because the crab was already written into the starting conditions, waiting for the right question to be asked. Which means evolution may be less like a sculptor working from nothing and more like a reader, finding the same chapter in the same book every time the conditions tell it to turn to that page. The crab did not try to become a crab. The lobster ancestor it descended from did not aim at anything. There was no plan, no direction, no intention. Just pressure, time, and a genome that already had the answer filed somewhere inside it, waiting for the conditions that would make it necessary. You are the product of the same system. Every feature you have, your hands, your upright spine, the particular shape of your face, emerged from the same process. Pressure, time, a genome finding the answer that was already latent inside it. You did not choose to have opposable thumbs any more than the hermit crab chose to fold its tail. You are the version of the answer the environment unlocked. The unsettling part is not that evolution keeps making crabs. The unsettling part is that it keeps making them on purpose, without anyone being in charge of the purpose. That is either the most comforting or the most disturbing thing about being alive, depending on how long you sit with it. But if evolution keeps returning to the same body plans, unlocking the same answers from the same latent genetic code, what other answers are already written inside you, waiting for the conditions that have not arrived yet? Because researchers mapping dormant regions of the human genome have found ancient sequences switched off millions of years ago, conserved across species with no known current function. Code that was active once. Code that evolution kept, even after it stopped using it. Code that is still there. The question is not whether it will ever be,